Hey everyone, since Kaladesh is not yet out on Magic Online, we are going to continue playing some Modern here, at least for the foreseeable future. And I'm kind of done with the Grixis stuff for now, waiting until the Blue-Red Fastland actually gets released, and then we'll certainly do some Bruin. But for now, we're kind of playing like some sweet decks, and this deck got 31st at an Open, at least Bant Company did. I changed a lot of stuff. Basically, like, I like the idea, but I didn't necessarily like the execution. So that list had a bunch of fat creatures like Knight of the Reliquary, Loxodon Smiter, stuff like that. Spell Quellers were in the sideboard, and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to play a bunch of sweet cards to company into. So we have some Tireless Trackers, Reflector Mage. Yes, it is playable in Modern. Spell Quellers, and then, the Mopey Kitchen Figs, but whatever. Like, we kind of need this, and it's just like a sticky threat that helps against Burn, which should be a bad matchup. And I also like the fact that, like, Tracker plus Spell Queller, like, kind of disguises this. Just the fact that, like, if you have a Clue lying around and you pass with 3 mana, they might not necessarily expect Spell Queller, whereas if you're just playing Smiters and Knights and stuff like that, you can't really play Spell Queller main, which makes it so, like, I get why I was in the sideboard of the other deck, but at the same time, I feel like this is a good enough card, and it's a card that a lot of people have not really played with very much in Modern, and I want to try it out, so I want to try and make it as good as possible. And plus, I think the Tracker is just a very underplayed card in Modern. We have 9 fetch lands to go along with this, and I imagine this card probably just beats decks like Jund and Abzan kind of straight up, so another thing to disguise the Spell Queller, we have Vendilion Click, which the original list had too. But it's nice that if your opponent just chooses to not play a spell, like, you can still do something with your mana, like you can play Vendilion Click instead of actually having to cast a Spell Queller. Like, a lot of the time it is probably right to just jam the Spell Queller, but now we have Vendilion Click instead. So I think that's pretty sweet. We have 29 creatures total. Granted, 8 of them are mana dorks. So it's kind of like 21, but the Noble Hierarchs are generally going to be decent hits, so I think it's like 25. But, I mean, if you're getting like a Tracker in a Birds of Paradise, that kind of helps too, because then you have more mana to actually sack your clues and stuff. So, I like the creature count for company. I like that the sideboard has a bunch of creatures that we can company into. We'll get into that in a minute. So yeah, 8 1-drops, 8 2-drops, 13 3-drops, which might seem heavy, but in order for company to be at its very, very best, we want to be hitting 2 3-drops. So I played a lot of 3-drops, and I just copied the 8 8 13 from the list that got 31st because I felt like that was pretty well thought out, and it made a lot of sense to me. So 2-drops, Voice of Resurgence, I think is just the best one. Then we have a Miser's Spellskite, a Miser's Selfless Spirit, which can do pretty sweet things. I like the fact that Spellskite can protect Spell Queller. Spellskite is also just like main deckable hate in Modern at this point with Infect and Death Shadow Zoo and all those sorts of decks running around. Voice is just nice. It would be kind of nice if we had like a sacrifice outlet that we could company into, but I'm not sure that there are very many good Bant options for that. So we just have some raw voices, but if you end up like companying into them and then like blocking their stuff or whatever, that's cool, right? So then you'll end up with some big elementals most likely. A couple Scavenging Oozes, which I think are basically Tarmogoyfs in this deck. We have a lot of creatures. Most of them are probably going to die. And then Ooze can get pretty big, gain you some life, and is also like Graveyard Hate against Goryo's Vengeance or Snapcaster Mage. And then Selfless Spirit just is one of the few things that can help actually protect against like Anger of the Gods and Wrath of God and stuff like that. So I like having the Miser Selfless Spirit. I think the card is kind of weak just to draw naturally on its own, so I do like one copy a lot. Then we have 4 Path to Exiles, which I think you would probably expect from a deck like this. 23 land, only utility lands are Gavany Townships. The Knight version could not play Razorverge Thicket, which I think is one of the biggest draws to this deck, where your mana is often going to be relatively pain-free, which is pretty sweet. So Razorverge Thicket, thumbs up. Township, I think, is just excellent. It gives you another thing to do with your mana. It curves perfectly off of like Collected Company into this. So that is also really sweet. We don't have anything like Lingering Souls, but we do have company, So we are hopefully going to have a bunch of creatures in play, and works really well with Kitchen Finks, obviously. So I think Township is the best utility land. Could play a Horizon Canopy. I thought about it, but like the more and more I did think about it, it was just like, I already have Township and Tracker. Hopefully I don't need to use my mana, like sacrificing my land to draw a card. Stirring Wildwood is also an option, or Celestial Colonnade if you want like a bigger late game threat, but I also didn't want any ETB tap land, so we're not going to be getting a ton of mileage out of our mana base, but I think that's okay. And then the last thing that I kind of want to address is the Thalia Heretic Cathar, the 3-drop. I kind of wanted to play one of those, and I kind of wanted to play one Eternal Witness, but I wanted the clicks to go with the Spell Quellers, and I also want click and Spell Queller just to be disruption against the combo-y decks, the decks that kind of just ignore you, just like the Scape Shifts and the Ad Nauseams and stuff like that. So I don't know. I didn't feel like I could really cut these because I didn't want to just be kind of dead in those matchups, but one Eternal Witness to hit off a company, rebuy company, or rebuy path I think would be pretty good. And I think Thalia is good enough certainly to try. I know that some people have been having some decent success with that card, and especially in a deck with 8 mana accelerators, I feel like turn 2 Thalia is just a gigantic beating. But oh well, maybe we'll play this and just be like, oh, our burn matchup is great, we don't need Finks or whatever. I highly doubt that's the case, but something like that might happen, and then you're like, okay, well, these are my slots for my Witness and my Thalia, so whatever. Sideboard, 2 Kataki, 2 Malira. I feel like both of those are probably kind of difficult matchups. We get to go up to the full amount of Kitchen Finks. Against Abzan, probably end up cutting Vendilion Click or something because it's so weak against Lingering Souls, and then Finks Township might be kind of your late game. Maybe I should play a 3rd Township. I don't know. Whatever. I'm kind of off it, but maybe 3rd Township would actually be good. Thalia Guardian of Thraben. I like this a lot as a sideboard card. If I was playing Bant Eldrazi, I would sideboard this card also. This is just a nice catch-all against a lot of decks that are spell-based, especially in a deck like this or Bant Eldrazi, where your deck is the majority of your deck is creatures. So Thalia just, if they're playing Death Shadow or Infect or Burn or Scapeshift or whatever, Thalia is just one of the very few cards that has crossover applications against all of those decks. And if it were not for the card Collected Company, I would just have this in my main deck, but I don't want to make my companies cost 5 unless I know for sure it's gonna Thalia is gonna be a hammer in the matchup. So I have 2 in the sideboard. Could see a 3rd one. I think 2 is pretty easy though. And there might be a little bit of tension where I'm gonna want to company main phase to maybe try and hit this so that they can't wrath me or whatever. But maybe if that's the case, then maybe I want to hold open company to hit Spell Queller to actually snipe the wrath. But if I'm gonna company in response to a wrath, that's so risky. I could just company after the wrath, right? So I think maybe I don't know, some sort of ramp spell or something would be a better analogy, where it's just do you try and company main phase into Thalia to make their spell worse, or do you actually try and counter it with Spell Queller? So yeah, there's a little bit of tension, but overall I think it's still completely reasonable. Dismember, basically short on answers to Tarmogoyf. Didn't really want to play something like Fiend Hunter or anything, so we just have a little Dismember. A couple explosives. I was kind of worried about Lingering Souls, actually, which might not, you might see this card and just be like, oh, he wants to beat up on Death Shadow Zoo or whatever. And it's yeah, that's true, but I also just looked at the deck and I was beating through a Lingering Souls is actually going to be kind of tough, especially if I don't have a Township. So Explosives is a nice card that you can board in against Abzan and probably kill their Tarmogoyf and maybe your Voice, which is probably also fine. And then we have some more Spell Skites. Might be a liability because Infect has a bunch of Twisted Images, thanks Tom Ross. But it's still good against Death Shadow Zoo. They have a tough time removing this thing. And, if Burn wants to cite in Destructive Revelry against me, sure, that's fine. I get it. But we also have Burnt and Forge Tender, which I think is the big pickup. This is pretty nice against Burn. Also very good at protecting your squad from Anger of the Gods, which I think is a pretty big deal. And again, it's oh, do I company into this thing or do I company after the Anger? Who knows? We'll figure it out. But yeah, that's about it. I think this deck has a lot of cool options. I know Yoel Larson was writing about a version that had Aether Vial also, but I think I like Birds instead, especially once I have Tireless Tracker. But I don't know. I like this deck. I like how it looks. I think it has a lot of sweet cards, and if you can figure out a way to beat up on the fast creature decks, then this is gonna grind pretty well with the other decks. And then the big thing that I'm worried about is the decks that either go over the top or combo you out or whatever. But I think that we can sideboard against those hopefully. So I could see 5-0ing. I could see going 1-4. Who knows? We'll figure it out.